It's probably one of the most incredible stories of the 20th century. In the 1960s, these 6 teenagers were stranded on a deserted island in the Pacific Ocean. Completely alone and without many resources, they had an adventure that could be from a classic movie. In this video, we want to tell you their incredible story, show you how it happened, that they got stranded, and what they did then is unbelievable. At the end, we also have more survival stories that not only show what man can be capable of if he only wants it bad enough, but also how it's possible to survive for several days at the bottom of the sea without a submarine or any diving equipment. It's going to be very exciting. So stay tuned here at Wonderlane. The incredible story of the 6 teenagers begins on the small Pacific archipelago of Tonga, where in 1965, the 6 friends, Sion, Stephen, David, Kolo, Mono, and Luke, attended school together. The 6 teenagers were inseparable at the time, and they were always looking for new, exciting things to do together. For one special adventure, the 6 of them even stole an old fishing boat and set off for the Fiji Islands on an incredible 750-kilometer journey from Tonga. Originally, they just wanted to spend a few days in the wild in Fiji and then come back as normal. But it turned out to be completely different than they had ever imagined. The boat trip from Tonga to Fiji alone was supposed to take 2 days. But the young people directly underestimated this. As for provisions, they packed only 2 bags of bananas, a few coconuts, and a small gas stove. None of the 6 thought of a map or a compass, and only one of the 6 had the faintest idea of how to drive a boat. Nevertheless, they set off in the middle of the night and found themselves in situations that are hard to believe. Shortly after setting off, they took a nap, which led to the boat veering off course and plunging them into an absolute nightmare. The ship was quickly caught in a storm, which not only caused it to slowly but surely break apart, but also caused the 6 friends to swim around in the open sea for days without ever seeing land. Since the provisions were also consumed extremely quickly, they had to start directly with the fight for survival and tried to catch fish on one side and collect rainwater and coconut shells on the other side in order not to die of thirst. However, just before they gave up all hope of survival, they discovered land and believed they were saved. But here the fight for survival went into the next round. The 6 friends quickly realized that not a single soul lived on this island and that they were completely on their own. The joy of solid ground under their feet therefore immediately gave way to the fight for survival, which in this case took on incredible features. To avoid having to sleep in the open air, the 6 first dug a cave with their bare hands to find shelter from storms. Since they did not plan to stay on the deserted island for very long, they began to build a large raft with which they tried to sail back home. However, this attempt was quickly stopped by a gigantic wave that not only destroyed the raft, but also caused a complete rethink to take place in the group. In fact, instead of trying to leave the island as quickly as possible, they decided to make the island their home for now. Accordingly, the first thing they did was to adapt their diet to the circumstances. They ate raw fish and seagulls, and also tried to process the birds' eggs for their benefit. After months of wandering around the island and absolute perplexity as to how they would ever live a civilized life here, however, a miracle occurred. On the deserted island, the 6 friends discovered ruins, small weapons such as machetes and knives, and even chickens and seeds. These resources did not come from nowhere. In fact, this very island was inhabited 100 years earlier by indigenous people, who were then driven out by colonial forces. Thanks to these weapons and supplies, the friends even managed to prepare roasted meat and extract water from trees, until the next misfortune hit them. One day, one of the friends, Stephen, fell off of a cliff and broke his leg. Fortunately, instead of panicking, his friends splinted the leg with a branch, and miraculously, it healed back to its original state after a few weeks. After some time on the island, when the friends became extremely bored, they started a project that leaves one speechless. To counteract the boredom, they started to transform the island into a vacation paradise with their own hands, which ended up being almost as good as a large resort. Using materials provided by the island, they built a gym, a badminton court, and even guitars from coconut shells and steel straps from their broken ship, among other things. The six made the best of the almost inhuman situation and, with their irrepressible will to survive and a collegial cooperation, ensured that they survived in a place where most others would have given up a long time ago. They still had a great desire to return home one day, and accordingly set out permanent smoke signals in the hope that a passing boat would see them. Some ships ignored these signals, but on September 11, 1966, the time finally came and a New Zealand ship around Captain Peter Warner recognized the smoke. This ship acted then extremely fast and rescued the teenagers after an inconceivable 15 months on the lonely island and brought them home. Once there, they were received anything but benevolently. Quite the opposite. After their arrival, they were immediately arrested by the police and locked up in jail because they had stolen the old fishing boat before they left. So the nightmare continued immediately. It was only after a few months that the youngsters could be ransomed by the sailor who had rescued them, and he had sold the rights to their unbelievable story to a film studio. For this film, the six friends even traveled back to the deserted island to recreate all the situations they actually experienced. When the movie was aired, only a few viewers could believe that this story actually happened, which shows that the six friends accomplished something that is absolutely unbelievable. As announced at the beginning, we now have two more incredible survival stories on the high seas that show what man is capable of when it comes to bear survival. For the first incredible story, we travel to Mexico and a man named Jose Salvador Alvarenga, who has held a sad world record since 2012. Namely, the record for the longest time a person has ever spent lost at sea, an incredible 438 days, or nearly a year and a half. Alvarenga, who was working as a fisherman at the time, actually only wanted to set sail on a 7-meter short boat for this short hunt. Out of nowhere, his boat was caught in a storm, which is why after a short time the engine failed and the ship drifted out to sea. Surrounded by nothing but water on a ship that was too small to be seen from the air, and without provisions, a fight for survival began that was unparalleled. With nothing to eat on the boat, Alvarenga had to catch small birds and fish and somehow try not to die of thirst from the rainwater or his own urine. The coming months in the middle of the Pacific Ocean held other challenges that seemed insurmountable. Alvarenga carried only a sweatshirt to protect himself from the blazing sun. In addition, although he was seen by several freighters, none of the ships agreed to help him. It was only after more than a year that Alvarenga discovered an island in the Marshall Islands where he saw another human being after ages, 8,000 kilometers away from his port in Mexico. After finally being rescued there, he traveled back to Mexico and wrote a book about his struggle for survival, which sold extremely well worldwide. We would probably have been very happy to do without this traumatic experience, however. To conclude this video, we now come to a man who also survived something incredible. This time, it's not about how someone was lost on the high seas, but struggled for days to survive underwater. In 2013, a man named Harrison Ojiba Okene was working as a cook on a large freighter, 42 kilometers off the Nigerian coast, when this freighter was hit by a gigantic wave and began to sink shortly thereafter. Everything looked like Okene would soon lose his life. While the ship was sinking and more water was entering the cabins, Okene managed to save himself in a small bathroom with some space left on the ceiling, which was not filled with water after all. So 30 meters below the surface of the sea, there was no way out of the ship, and Okene had to fight for his survival in absolute darkness, without food and drink, at temperatures around the freezing point. In addition, since oxygen was getting scarce and the first sharks were already exploring the tails, everything looked as if Okene would survive a few hours at most. The only thing that helped him in this situation were a couple of Coke cans that were in the same room, as well as a small air cushion that he could use to keep his head and chest above water to avoid freezing to death. After already enduring 60 hours underwater, and oxygen would have been enough for a maximum of 2 more, he finally heard relieving sounds. Out of nowhere, several divers knocked on the tails, sent by the shipping company to retrieve possible valuables. Okene finally saw his way out and clung to one of the divers, who then brought him to the surface of the sea at extreme risk to his lungs. Once there, many could not believe that he had actually survived this scenario. as it was in this way that he became the person who had survived the longest time underwater without scuba gear. To this day, O'Kenny says he suffers from massive nightmares after this trauma and never wants to return to the open sea again. And that's it for our video and unbelievable survival fights on the high seas. Write us in the comments what you think about them and what you would have done in these situations. Otherwise, like this video if you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time here at Wonderlane.